When the U.S. presidency was created, it was intended by the constitutional framers to be a much weaker office than it is today. To illustrate this point, let's consider James Madison, a main architect of the U.S. Constitution who eventually went on to become president. He argued strongly that authority to declare war rests entirely with Congress. Early presidents closely followed this view of limited presidential power when it came to using the military. Take, for example, the War of 1812 between the U.S. and Great Britain. Even with hostilities raging on American soil, President Madison waited for Congress to declare war against the British. Fast forward to now. It is inconceivable that a modern-day president would not unilaterally take action if the homeland was under immediate threat. Since the end of World War II, presidents have engaged in military operations around the globe without an official congressional declaration of war. Vietnam is a good example of this. President Lyndon Johnson steadily escalated U.S. involvement in Indochina during the 1960s, even though Congress did not declare war. So why the change in presidential power? This video will explain the evolution of the American presidency from a relatively weak political institution into the powerhouse of the federal government it is now. There are several factors to consider when explaining how modern presidents are more powerful than earlier presidents. These factors include the centralized nature of the American presidency, the vague language in Article 2 of the U.S. Constitution, and the fact that the presidency is the only office in the American political system that is the result of a national election. Let's take each of these factors one at a time. The first factor explaining the growth of the presidency is the centralized nature of the executive branch. Unlike Congress, with its decentralized structure, all power in the presidency is vested in one individual. This singular authority allows the president to more effectively use the power granted to it in Article 2, which outlines the executive branch. The president can act more quickly and decisively than Congress because of its centralized structure. This centralized structure also gives the media a focal point. It is easier for the media to cover one president than 435 members of Congress, so the president is more able to influence public opinion and the direction of policy through the media than Congress is. The next factor that helps explain why modern American presidents are more powerful than their predecessors is the vague language of Article 2. The ambiguity of this article does not give a precise meaning behind such presidential roles as head of state or commander-in-chief. This has allowed the meaning of those roles to be stretched over time. Early presidents viewed the powers of the office as limited to those powers expressly granted by Article 2. This is known as the Whig theory. While there have been exceptions, most early presidents until Teddy Roosevelt followed this narrow interpretation of Article 2. Modern presidents followed the stewardship theory, which views presidential power as extensive as long as the U.S. Constitution does not expressly prohibit the use of such powers. This broad interpretation has helped to lead to an expansion of presidential power. The final factor is national election. The president is the only position within the American political system selected in a truly national election. Even though electing a president is a state-by-state contest through the Electoral College, the president represents the entire country and can claim a national mandate to implement his or her agenda. No other elected office can claim such a mandate. Senators are elected by their respective states, and representatives are elected by their respective congressional districts. On the other hand, presidential candidates appear on the ballot in every state, so the entire nation is choosing the president. This national mandate allows the president to set the agenda. Setting the agenda gives the president the ability to focus the country on his or her priorities. Over time, presidents have figured out how to use these three factors to increasingly expand the power of the executive branch well beyond what the constitutional framers envisioned. Advances in technology, such as radio, TV, and the internet, have only fueled this expansion of executive power. Also, as the world has become a more complex and dangerous place, the American people, Congress, and the courts have ceded power to the president to deal with all of these challenges. The fact is, we expect more out of our presidents today than earlier generations did. For better or for worse, the modern president is now the focal point of the American political system.